Shabbat Shalom. Hello from the sanctuary of WJC. It is very strange to be here without all of you, without seeing your faces, and to be starting without bumping into you in the hallway and hearing your voices and saying a quick hello. But I am very glad to be with you in this way. And I'd like to talk today about a brief passage in this week's Parsha. Parshat Ekev contains the second paragraph of the Shema, and I'd like to focus on the very first line, the first half of that conditional sentence, which might be familiar to many of us, which reads, V'haya im shamoa tishma'u al mitzvotai asher anochi mitzaveh etchem hayom la'ahava et Adonai Elohechem ula'avdo b'chol levavchem u'b'chol nafshechem. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Lord your God and serving God with all your heart and soul. The second half of the sentence talks all about the rewards, the rain and wine and oil, the grain and fresh grass and eating to fulfillment. But it's this first half that I want to talk about. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving the Lord your God and serving God with all your heart and soul. Okay, let's break this down. Obey the commandments, love the Lord your God, and serve God with all your heart and soul. Obey, I think I know what that means. Love, I know what love is. But what does it mean to serve God? If we can't answer that question, then it becomes very hard to do it with all our heart and all our soul, even if we believe or don't believe that we're going to get a reward. There are a few answers to that question, but let's take a look at one of them, which is given to us by Rabbeinu Bachya, a medieval Spanish commentator. He says, our sages in Ta'anit 2 in the Babylonian Talmud ask rhetorically, what kind of service can one perform for God with one's heart? They answer, prayer. All right, prayer. We're serving God with our hearts in prayer. Great. But what does that mean? What does he mean when he says prayer? He continues and tells us that this is the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, the standing prayer that was created by the men of the Great Assembly after Moses in order to be learned by heart, to be in plain and simple language so that no one would become confused, everyone could learn it, and so that fools could pray and not be at a disadvantage from the wise, which is a little bit harsh, but okay. The ideal is equitable, simple, specific prayer, and it is so powerful, he claimed, that by praying it correctly, we could change the very laws of nature and save ourselves from death. In other words, we ought to be careful with our words because they have power. Reb Zalman Schachter Shlomi, the founder of the Renewal Movement, offers another understanding of what we mean when we talk about prayer or the service of the heart. He writes that we shouldn't be siloing different parts of ourselves in prayer, but bringing them together. Our minds that love concepts and ideas, our bodies which remember movement, bowing, sitting, and standing, and our hearts which crave relationship, closeness, and comfort. When we bring all of these pieces together, we are able then to sit benachat ruach, in serenity of spirit, and let God's love wash over us. To better demonstrate what he means, he brings in an interview he heard on Fresh Air with Terry Gross, who was interviewing Gene Robinson, the first openly gay Anglican bishop. They were talking about his prayer life, and he said, what I do is I sit quietly and close my eyes, and I let God love me. That's where I remember who I am and whose I am. Who I am and whose I am. This harkens back to what it feels like we're doing when we say the Shema in the first place. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, Adonai our God, Adonai is one. Adonai is our God, and we are God's people. Prayer reminds us that we belong to God and God belongs to us. And our Parsha, Parshat Ekev, allows us to acknowledge that this is a complicated and messy relationship with mistakes and regrets on both sides, with uncomfortable hierarchies, and with what can feel like some strange demands. Professor Adele Reinhardt of the University of Ottawa says that this is because Parshat Ekev describes God's emotional entanglement with the people Israel. This entanglement, like many human relationships, entails love but also ambivalence, satisfaction but also disappointment, the desire to protect, and the impulse to hurt. Our struggle to understand what it is to serve God and love God is rooted in the fact that we are, or might be these days, disappointed by God, or we feel that God isn't where God should be, and that when we call, there might not be any answer. It can be hard to move into deeper relationship when we feel this way. I wonder what it would be like for us to just stay still, to stay tangled and unresolved and let God love us anyway, and let God stay tangled and love God anyway too. Maybe we can do this on Shabbat morning, wrapped in a tallis, and maybe we can only do this at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, locked in our bathroom because that's the only quiet place in our house. But whatever the case, whatever the posture, whether we are praying the words of the Shemona Esrei or not, the service of our hearts is valuable to God, to ourselves, to our communities, and to our families. Shabbat Shalom.